Hello, welcome on the Watches TV, welcome on Primetime Watchmaking in the News, and we have quite a lot of things to go over in this edition, mainly industry news, and we will be coming back on some of the consequences of this COVID-19 crisis. Well, watchmaking has been hit pretty hard, but same can be said, unfortunately, about so many other industries. But at the same time, the situation has also created room for a few smart opportunities. And talking about opportunities, well, we'll be introducing a pretty cool and fun game for our patrons, and I'll get back on this a little bit later. And yes, here the lockdown is almost over in Switzerland, but I'm still kind of in my cave mode, if you see what I mean. Okay, so let's jump and start with some key business figures. And as you can imagine, the industry came to a standstill in the last couple of months. Swiss export numbers just plummeted, and in April alone, exports fell by 82%, almost like an on and off situation. Factories and manufacturers were all closed, retail was shut almost throughout the world, and people had other things on their mind than buying watches. So these numbers are in a certain way no big surprise, and should be more or less repeated in the coming months. So we'll most certainly see some improvement at one stage, but there is no way that the industry will recuperate what has been lost. If for most countries we're talking a severe drop of their GDP of approximately 5 to 10% in 2020, well, for the watchmaking industry, I think we'll be talking more of 30 to 40%. So this is indeed quite substantial and will have some long-term consequences on brands, suppliers, retailers, well, the full ecosystem, and some might not recover at all. So personally, I don't think that we will see too many brands disappear, but what we will see is a serious downsizing of the industry, and that's something we've been saying here since quite a while. So this COVID situation has simply and drastically accelerated inevitable changes, and unfortunately it also demonstrated that basically, well, we had massive overproduction capabilities. Many brands have invested gazillion amount of money in internalizing some of these production capabilities, just to be able to say that, well, yes, we do everything ourselves. Well, in my opinion, this was done more to serve some marketing and communication needs rather than actual production requirements. Again, watchmaking has historically functioned with a network of suppliers specialized sometimes in extremely precise tasks, and we have many examples of brands working like this with great success. Think, for instance, of one of our latest video regarding Chapek. Well, to come up with their new sportier steel collection, well, there were approximately 10 different suppliers working together, coordinated efficiently, and this resulted in a pretty cool new watch with a very nice movement developed specifically for this Antarctic collection, and they managed to pull this off in a pretty short period of time. I'm not saying that it took them 10 months to do this, of course, but I mean, nevertheless, from the original idea to the actual product being produced, well, this has been done extremely efficiently. So what will happen to these overcapacities and redundancies found throughout the industry? Well, it's still a bit early to tell, but if you compare with other industries, the answers are generally quite brutal. So the difference here being that we are talking luxury industry with very important margin factors for some, with often huge overheads, huge marketing budgets, and of course this doesn't apply to all the players of the industry. Brands are better off slightly, well, at least brands belonging to the big groups with deep pockets and big piles of cash still available. For smaller brands or suppliers whose margins were already quite squeezed, well, the situation is definitely very different and alarming. I mean, totally stressful, in fact. But here in Switzerland, the government has so far enabled to reduce the direct impact of this restructuring moment, using, for instance, kind of special temporary unemployment measures, and basically wages have been paid by the state, but of course, I mean, this won't go on forever. And with the continuous massive decline on the demand side, well, to be blunt, one can only envision that some important layoffs will sadly occur in the second part of the year when these measures will fade away. I just hope that we won't lose too much know-how in the process, and that's a serious risk, actually. But coming quickly back on the brand side, like I said, I doubt that we will see too many brands disappear. But obviously, it's going to be tough for many of them, and most will need to adapt to this changing environment. It's definitely one of those survival of the fittest moment, and the brands that were performing pretty well before the crisis, I mean this club of 10 to 15 powerful brands, will only get more powerful, securing their positioning, and for the other ones, well, it will become even more seriously complicated. On the other hand, and since none of the big players really communicated over the last couple of months, well, the shows, and on top of it, I mean, the shows being cancelled and so forth, well, this has freed up media space and has created a nice opportunity for some independents to reach out to a much wider audience, since people also had much more time to explore different avenues, sometimes questioning what is relevant and meaningful. So on one side of the spectrum, well, you have the big established and powerful players. And on the other side, well, you have more niche brands that indeed benefited from this freed up space. And what better example than MB&F and H. Moser, which came up with great success with a very original and very smart collaboration. Something first witnessed actually a couple of years ago for Only Watch when Urwerk and Laurent Ferrier came up with this very surprising timepiece mixing both DNAs of both brands. So brands-retailer collaboration, I mean, we've seen this for a very long time, but two brands that one could think are competitors, well, that's quite original. And at the same time illustrates that this kind of family feeling you get with the independents. So coming back on MB&F and H. Moser, Max Busser and Edouard Mellon naturally initiated this idea way before any signs of this COVID crisis. But I believe that their collaboration is just a great example of what people want in these changing times. We want to see different things. So now a question for you. What other interesting collaboration would you like to see in the future? I mean, so please share your thoughts and ideas in the comments below. I'm really looking forward to hear what you can think of. Okay, but one additional thing I just wanted to say is that not only the MB&F and H. Moser showed us some very cool watches, but both of them also used this opportunity to either strengthen or develop their e-commerce side of their business. And this worked really fantastically well for them. So they managed to create hype around the project. I mean, they got a lot of attention. And basically, they sold everything in a matter of days, and that's just insane. In general, we've seen many brands developing this e-commerce dimension in the last month. Think of Breitling, Zenith, Hublot. And though this will never completely eclipse traditional retail business, well, this has definitely speeded up the development of this complementary sale channel, which sometimes, I mean, bypasses traditional retailers and seriously annoys them along the way, and or sometimes includes them with some kind of retro commissions, depending on where the watches are sold and shipped to. But yes, in general, watchmakers have always been quite reluctant in embracing new technology and changes, but a crisis is always an ideal opportunity for transformations. Basically, it's called evolution, and we have for sure entered a new era, even though I still believe that you still need to kind of touch and feel the product. Anyhow, e-commerce complements nicely how you purchase your watch, and it's only the beginning. So for instance, we even heard that Patek and Rolex kind of closed their eyes here and there and did leave some room for some of their retailers to use such channel to sell a few watches during this lockdown. So yes, that was quite surprising, right? And talking about these two brands, and again, nothing too official there, but they had both previously declared that they wouldn't present any new timepieces in 2020. Obviously quite a bold move, but it seems that they are coming back on these decisions and we should see some new products from both of them in the second part of the year. So you see, even if you are as powerful as these houses can be, well, you still need to maintain some hype and desire on new products to keep your position. Okay, let's continue with other industry news, and I have a really good one coming up for you. I mean, one that kind of illustrates pretty well how some people just live on another planet, kind of completely disconnected. But first, a little recap on the Baselworld SIHH saga, and now I think I can most definitely use the term ex-Baselworld. I don't know if you remember, but I told you a few months ago that once the organizers had announced that the cancellation of this show had been acted, well, they immediately trumpeted that the next edition will take place in January of 2021. Then came the impressive pullout of the massive and historical players, including Rolex, Patek, Chopard, Tudor, the 4 LVMH brands, Tiger, Zenith, Hublot, and Bulgari. Well, the Basel World organizers said a few weeks back that they will simply scrap the 2021 edition altogether. So the brands I just mentioned will organize their own event in Geneva in April of next year, alongside the ex-SIHH, now known as Watches and Wonders. But then, what would happen to all the other brands, approximately 450, that were still under the so-called umbrella of the Basel event? Well, this we don't know yet, but the only thing we know is that they won't be coming to Geneva either. It seems that the shows to be held here in Geneva will be more focused on some kind of B2B event. And it also seems that they blocked any watch-related shows willing to develop something at the same time here. Personally, I think this is kind of a missed opportunity. I would have really liked to see the industry come together and show some signs of unity and solidarity. But I guess egos and the will of flexing some serious muscle among peers won the battle. Well, we'll keep you posted on this as soon as we can, because so far not much has come out, weeks are passing by, and maybe there is still a bit of hope. And the other day, well, I was just thinking at something I said a couple of years ago after the pullout of the Swatch Group of the Basel event. So one of the ideas would be for Basel to coincide back again with the SIHH. But let's push this much further, and if the event is to get smaller, why not scrap Basel as a location? I mean, MCH, the event parent company and promoter of Basel World, also have in their location portfolio some pretty big halls in Lausanne. That's 60 kilometers from Geneva. So why not move the entire show with a new concept in Lausanne? People, retailers, visitors, the press could easily hop from one destination to the other, even on the same day. The SIHH reduced its opening days for the next edition to only 4, but now would make sense to extend it again, align it to this new Basel or Lausanne world, have the weekend open to the public for the SIHH if it still wants to remain confined to some happy few people on the rest of the days. Well, there are clearly solutions if people started to talk to each other, drop their egos and pool what seems as practical and maybe obvious synergies. Well, there are still a lot of brands waiting for a solution, and hopefully we will soon know in which direction things are going. But considering the current economic climate, well, we can for sure imagine some serious downsizing of these shows, and by shows I mean any trade fairs. Well, budgets are being squeezed everywhere, and the most dramatic consequence is that there will be definitely much less champagne to enjoy. Well, I just hope some kind of actually pragmatic and diplomatic solution will be found, because you know my views on the necessity of such shows just needs to be done differently, more cost effective, and still be able to involve the public one way or another. But one good news is that what had previously been planned in Geneva in April to slightly counterbalance the cancellation of this year's shows, an event called the Geneva Watch Days, regrouping approximately 20-25 brands. Well, this event has been pushed to late August, but it wasn't sure if it would occur, obviously. Well, now we finally got the confirmation that this will indeed take place, and more details will be soon shared with us, but it's a good opportunity for us. Another event that we appreciate a lot, the EPHG, the trade fair for the suppliers of the industry, was supposed to occur in June, approximately now, and this one got cancelled but pushed back to September. No decision has yet been taken if it will happen. We're still waiting on an announcement, but even if it does, this one will most probably be a much smaller size, and I really hope it will, because suppliers are being hurt badly now, despite their vital role, and they need as much support as possible for the good of the industry. But you see, one big question mark is simply if people will be able to attend. For the time being, many companies and brands are forbidding their employees to meet any supplier, as simple as that. And we don't know when this will evolve favorably without naturally taking any unnecessary sanitary risk, of course. Well, yes, I mean, this is a complicated equation, and though today most factories have reopened, working in team shift, and for us, well, it's also kind of complicated because we don't know yet when we'll be able to return and do some of these manufacturer films that we love doing, such as those great walkthroughs, for instance. Okay, another good news, well, at least something sending a positive signal, is that Philips, Bax & Russo will be organizing an important watch auction here in Geneva. First, they thought of doing it exclusively online with live broadcast of the auction, but without any public. Well, now they've decided to not exactly do a regular auction with hundreds of people, but there will be public and collectors present while maintaining these, required social distancing measures. Well, nevertheless, I really think it shows the will of getting back to a more normal mode of organizing our lives. And I can only salute the courage, in fact, of having taken this decision. It doesn't go without any risks, but again, it's an encouraging decision taken by Oral Bax and his team. And by the way, they really have a very impressive selection of watches, including some great timepieces from the personal collection of Jean-Claude Viva. And we had the chance of filming them, some of them, in the recent days, and I can guarantee that these watches are sweet. And it's going to be extremely interesting to see the result of the auction. It's going to be a very interesting indicator. So for info, Philips will be the only auction house doing this. The other main ones, Christie's and Sotheby's, concentrating for the time being on online sales. So before coming back on this juicy story I mentioned before, well, this leads me to introduce a fun game for our patrons. As you can imagine, and even more so in these complicated times, well, your monthly pledges mean a lot to us. And we are so thankful because it really does make a difference, and you are all very welcome to give us a hand. Anyhow, we decided to introduce a fun little game, and the goal for our patrons will be to guess the overall sales figures reached by 5 lots chosen by us in this upcoming Philips auction. And the one that comes closest to this full amount will win a t-shirt and a Viva Watchmaking Swiss Army knife. Quite simple but fun, I reckon. And information will be shared on our Patreon page as well as on our website on how to participate. Okay, back to more industry news, and this one I think you will enjoy. As you know, most brands and groups have been hit, and those more exposed on the Chinese market, well, they for sure did bit the dust even more. So Chinese consumers weigh a lot for some of these brands, and with the travel downfall of Chinese tourists who were purchasing watches while on tour, well, this has had a very strong and negative impact on sales figure. So the good news is that China has since gently reopened, and though we have seen some encouraging signs, domestic purchases are not yet at the level which can compensate for these losses. So brands from big luxury groups such as Swatch, LVMH, Richemont have been severely affected. But regarding Richemont, well, we just have heard a great story as part of their employees have been asked to accept some kind of pay cut, and they even went back on some bonuses which had previously been agreed upon. Okay, so far one can say, well, fair enough, not nice if it concerns you directly. But given the circumstances, well, this can be understandable. But this is when it becomes really sweet, as the executive committee of the group, meaning slightly less than 10 people, overseeing the entire group, well, they decided that they deserved, on average, a 35% pay increase. And we're not talking small salaries here. When you go, for instance, from 5 million to 8 million Swiss francs, well, you see what I mean. So the timing of both announcements is just simply really awkward, not to say indecent. And I have nothing against people earning good money, but taking on one side and giving to yourself the following day just seems that you are totally disconnected from reality, and this has shaken quite badly the management layer of these brands and the group itself. And it reminds me a bit what happened just before and during the financial crisis of 2008, and those were not glory days of our societies. Oh, and one last thing, well, you also have to put in perspective that when staff were asked to stay home during the lockdown, practically all the brands benefited from these temporary unemployment measures I just mentioned before, which basically are ultimately paid by the taxpayer. But just wanted to mention one thing, that Rolex and Patek obviously also told their entire people to stay home, but neither companies asked for these measures. They carried this by themselves. Classy. End of story. Okay, that was it for the little gossipy side of this edition of Prime Time. And before ending the show, just wanted to tease a few things as we have some nice videos coming your way shortly. For instance, one on the new crayon timepiece, a pretty amazing mechanical object. And another one on the very last chain maker here in business. And if you've ever wondered how you make a Milanese bracelet by hand, well, you'll know everything about this. We'll talk craft, we'll talk danger of losing this craft, as there is no more training available to learn how to do these chains. And I'm pretty sure most of you will enjoy this surprising encounter. All right, I do admit that we talk more business-related issues in this edition of Primetime, but I promise that we will do a much more product-oriented one in the coming weeks with all the best new watches seen so far in 2020. And one last thing, well, I really wanted to thank all of those who shared their appreciative feedback on our Global Force handmade documentary. We really loved producing this, and for those who haven't yet seen it, well, I clearly invite you to do so. And we are looking forward to doing some more of these, actually. Okay, now this is it for this edition of Primetime. Thanks for watching. Thanks to our great patrons, and please remember that we'll be introducing this fun guessing game for all of us supporting us with some extraordinary prizes. All right, so all the very best, take care, stay safe, and more than ever, Viva Watchmaking!